My wife, Ranatada, died at 38 in a car crash that shouldn't have happened. The police said she swerved to miss a dog, hit a telephone pole doing 50 miles an hour on Maple Street, a road she'd driven 1,000 times before. The dog lived. She didn't. That was 3 weeks ago, and I'm still trying to make sense of how my entire life collapsed in the span of a single phone call from Detroit Medical Center. I sold everything to bury her. Our house went to the first cash buyer who showed up. My truck went to my Uncle Gus for half what it was worth. I even pawned the Rolex my grandfather left me, the one he wore for 40 years at the Ford plant. $43,000 for a funeral. That's what it costs to say goodbye to someone you thought you'd grow old with. The funeral director, a man named Hutchkins with soft hands and a softer voice, kept talking about payment plans. But Renata deserved better than being buried on credit. The day we put her in the ground was unseasonably cold for October. I stood there in my only black suit, watching them lower her casket into the earth, thinking about the last words we'd exchanged. We'd argued about paint colors, ocean mist versus harbor gray for a guest room nobody ever used. I'd been irritated, told her it didn't matter, and she'd kissed my cheek anyway, said maybe someone would use it soon, and walked out the door. Those were her last words to me about paint. Her sister Bianca had stood apart from everyone else during the service, wearing dark sunglasses, even though clouds blocked the sun. She'd always been the difficult one, the sister who thought Renata had married beneath her. While everyone else offered condolences and casserlies, Bianca kept her distance until the very end, until that hydraulic system was lowering my wife into the ground. She approached me, then touched my arm with her cold fingers and leaned in close enough that I could smell the cigarette smoke clinging to her black dress. What she whispered took 8 seconds to say, but would haunt me forever. She was leaving you anyway for her yoga instructor. My brother Wyatt asked what she'd said. I couldn't form words. My legs felt disconnected from my body. The minister was saying something about eternal rest, but all I could hear was Bianca's words echoing in my head. Leaving you, anyway. The yoga instructor's name was Nolan. I'd met him once at a studio fundraiser, 28 years old with perfect posture and a man bun. That night, alone in our house that already belonged to strangers, I tore through Renata's belongings like a man possessed. I needed to know if Bianca was telling the truth. I went through her emails, her texts, her credit card statements. Nothing about Nolan, nothing about leaving. But in her jewelry box underneath the sterling silver necklace I'd given her for our 10th anniversary, my fingers found something that didn't belong. A USB drive, black plastic, no bigger than my thumb. There was a piece of masking tape on it with Renata's handwriting. The same careful script she used for grocery lists and love notes. It read, "If I die before 40. My hands trembled as I carried it to my laptop. The house was silent except for the hum of the computer starting up. One file appeared on the drive, a video dated 3 weeks before her death, the day she'd come home late from what she'd said was a closing that ran long. I clicked play, and my dead wife's face filled the screen. But this wasn't the Renata who kissed me goodbye over paint swatches. This woman looked terrified, her eyes darting to something off-camera every few seconds like she expected someone to burst through the door. "Colton," she began, and her voice cracked on my name. "If you're watching this, they killed me. I found out something about your family that they've been hiding for 30 years. The proof is in your father's workshop." Life with Renata had become predictable in the way that 15-year marriages often do. We knew each other's coffee orders, could predict each other's reactions to movies, and had long stopped fighting about whose turn it was to take out the trash. It was Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday for me, always had been. She handled the recycling on Wednesdays. That was us, a well-oiled machine that had forgotten it was supposed to be a romance. We'd met at my cousin Damon's wedding in 2009. She was the maid of honor in a lavender dress that made her skin glow, and I was the groomsman who accidentally knocked over a full glass of champagne, sending it cascading down that expensive fabric. Instead of the fury I expected, she laughed. A real laugh that came from somewhere deep in her chest and said, "Well, now I don't have to worry about looking too perfect in the photos." That was Renata. Always finding the bright side of things, always making disasters feel like adventures. Our house sat on a treeing street in suburban Detroit, a 3-bedroom colonial with good bones and bad plumbing that I was always promising to fix. The neighborhood was full of families with kids, and for years we'd tried to add our own to the mix. 2 miscarriages, 3 rounds of IVF, and finally a doctor who sat us down and explained that sometimes bodies just don't cooperate. Renee cried for a week, then one morning announced we were getting a dog instead. We never did get that dog. Sunday dinners with my mother, Lorraine, had become our tradition. She lived 20 minutes away in the same ranch house where I'd grown up, and she treated Renata like the daughter she'd never had. They'd spend hours in the kitchen together, Lorraine teaching her the secret to perfect pot roast while I watched football with my father Roland in the living room. He was a quiet man, a retired electrician who could fix anything with his hands, but struggled to say what was in his heart. The closest he came to emotion was the day he pulled me aside at my wedding and said, "You got a good one, son. Don't mess it up." My brother Wyatt lived 2 streets over with his wife Patricia and their twin boys. We'd have game nights once a month where Renata would dominate at Scrabble while accusing everyone else of making up words. She was always right. Patricia would bring her famous spinach dip. Wyatt would drink exactly 3 beers before switching to water, and we'd pretend we weren't getting older, that our lives weren't slowly calcifying into routine. Renata worked as a real estate agent for Wilmington Reilly, a mid-sized firm downtown. She was good at it, had a way of matching people with houses that fit them perfectly. She'd come home with stories about families finding their dream homes, about the joy on their faces at closing. Her commission checks kept us comfortable, allowed us to dream about maybe buying a cabin up north someday, somewhere near Traverse City, where we could escape when the city felt too heavy. I taught chemistry at Franklin High School, the same school I'd graduated from 23 years earlier. My students called me Mr. T, not because I was tough, but because they couldn't pronounce my last name properly. Torino. It never bothered me. I loved teaching. Loved the moment when a difficult concept finally clicked for a student. The pay wasn't great, but combined with Renata's income, we did fine. We were planning a trip to Italy for our 20th anniversary. Still 5 years away, but something to look forward to. The morning she died started like any other. I was grading lab reports at the kitchen table while she stood at the counter, holding up paint swatches against the morning light streaming through the window. The guest room had been bothering her for months. She said it needed personality, needed to feel welcoming. I was tired, had stayed up too late preparing lessons for the week, and her indecision over 2 nearly identical shades of blue irritated me more than it should have. "Oh, Mr. Harbor Gray?" she asked, though Harbor Gray looked blue to me, too. "They're the same color, Ren. Just pick one. They're completely different. Look at the undertones. Nobody ever uses that room anyway." She walked over, kissed my cheek despite my grumpiness, and said something that would replay in my mind 1,000 times after she was gone. Maybe someone will soon. Then she grabbed her purse and keys, said she had an early showing on the east side, a young couple looking for their first home. The door closed behind her at 8:17 a.m. The police knocked on that same door at 11:43 a.m. The funeral nearly destroyed me, both financially and emotionally. What they don't tell you about death is how expensive it is to die properly. The funeral director, Mr. Hutchkins, had a voice like warm milk and hands that had never known the hard work. He sat across from me in his mahogany-paneled office, sliding packages across the desk like he was selling vacation timelines, not coffins. I stood there, unable to move or speak as she tossed her rose onto the casket and walked away, her heels clicking on the cemetery's paved path. My brother Wyatt immediately asked what she'd said. His wife, Patricia, looked concerned. Even my normally oblivious father, Roland, noticed something was wrong. "Nothing," I managed to say. She said nothing. But that night, alone in a house that already belonged to strangers, Bianca's words consumed me. I pulled our wedding album off the shelf and threw it against the wall. The binding split, sending photos cascading across the floor. I found myself on my knees, gathering them up while sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. Then the sobbing turned to rage. And I started searching through Renata's things, needing to know if Bianca was telling the truth, needing to understand why my wife would betray 15 years of marriage for a 28-year-old yoga instructor with perfect abs and a man bun. I searched through everything that night. Her emails showed nothing but work correspondence and Amazon receipts. Her credit card statements revealed no suspicious charges, no hotel rooms or romantic dinners I didn't know about. Her phone, which I'd retrieved from the police with her other personal effects, contained hundreds of texts between us, mundane and loving in equal measure. The last one she'd sent me was a heart emoji after I'd texted that I'd pick up milk on the way home. In her jewelry box, beneath the tangle of necklaces and earrings I'd given her over the years, my fingers found something that didn't belong. A USB drive, small and black, with masking tape wrapped around it. Renata's careful handwriting spelled out 5 words that made my blood run cold. If I die before 40. My laptop sat on the kitchen table where I'd left it that morning, back when my biggest concern was grading lab reports. The house was silent except for the refrigerator's hum and my own ragged breathing. I inserted the USB drive with shaking hands. One file appeared on the screen, a video dated 3 weeks before her death. October 2nd, the day she'd come home 2 hours late from what she'd said was a complicated closing. I clicked play, and Renata's face filled the screen. But this wasn't my Renata. This woman looked haunted, her eyes darting off camera every few seconds, her hands trembling as she adjusted the camera. She was in our guest room, sitting on the bed we'd bought but never had guests use. Behind her, the walls were still that awful beige color she'd been so desperate to change. "Colleton," she began, and her voice cracked like she'd been crying. "If you're watching this, it means they killed me. And before you think I'm being dramatic or paranoid, please just listen to everything I have to say." She held up a manila folder, thick with documents. 3 weeks ago, I was showing a house on Crestwood Drive. The buyer never showed, but I found a box in the basement that the previous owner must have forgotten. It was full of old FBI documents, surveillance photos, trial transcripts. Your father's name was all over them. Colton Roland Torino isn't who you think he is. My stomach dropped as she continued, pulling papers from the folder and holding them up to the camera one by one. "Your Uncle Gus isn't your father's brother. His real name is Yeppe Torino. He testified against the Torino crime family in 1994 as part of a federal witness protection deal. Your father, Roland, wasn't an electrician. He was a U.S. Marshal assigned to protect him." She showed a photograph to the camera, grainy but clear enough. My father, younger, wearing a U.S. Marshal's badge, standing next to men in FBI windbreakers. "Your whole family is in witness protection, Colton. You, Wyatt, your mother, Lorraine. None of you are who you think you are." The room seemed to spin as she kept talking. "But here's the worst part. The reason we could never have children. It wasn't me, and it wasn't bad luck. When you were 3 years old, your father authorized an experimental procedure. You were sterilized, Colton. There's a sealed court document explaining that the Torino bloodline was deemed too dangerous to continue. The federal prosecutor insisted on it as part of the immunity deal." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "Your birth name was Carlo Torino, Jr. Your biological father was the head of the crime family. He ordered the murders of 3 judges before they finally convicted him. Your mother, your birth mother, made a deal with the feds to give you and Wyatt new lives. But the price was ensuring the bloodline ended with you two." She wiped her eyes and leaned closer to the camera. "I confronted Roland about this last month. I thought he'd deny it, but he didn't. He told me I was putting everyone in danger by digging into this. He said the Torinos never forget, never forgive, and if they found out where you all were, they'd kill every last one of you. He told me to forget what I'd learned, to burn those documents, to pretend I'd never seen them." Her voice grew stronger, more determined. "But you deserve to know who you are, Colton. You deserve to know why we couldn't have children. Why your father has enough cash hidden in his workshop to disappear at a moment's notice. Why there are no photos of any of you from before 1995. The proof is in his workshop in a metal box marked circuit breakers. He doesn't know I know about it. She looked directly into the camera, and for a moment she was my Ranatada again. I wasn't having an affair with Nolan. I've been meeting with him because his brother is a federal attorney. I was trying to figure out how to get us away from here safely, how to tell you the truth without destroying your whole world. But I think Roland knows what I've been doing. I think he told someone. And if something happens to me, if they make it look like an accident, you need to know it wasn't. The video cut to black. I sat in the darkness of our kitchen, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to process what I just learned. Then I grabbed my phone and called Wyatt. "Meet me at Dad's workshop," I said, "right now. Don't tell anyone where you're going." The workshop sat behind my father's house like it always had, a converted garage that smelled of sawdust and motor oil. Roland had spent 40 years in that space, or so I'd believed, fixing televisions and radios for neighbors who called him the best electrician in Detroit. The fluorescent lights flickered on when I hit the switch, illuminating the pegboard walls lined with tools I now wondered if he'd ever really used. Wyatt arrived 5 minutes after me, his face creased with concern. "Colton, what the hell is going on? It's 11 at night. Help me find a box marked circuit breakers," I said, already pulling containers off the metal shelving units. "You're scaring me, brother. Is this about Renata? You need to talk to someone about your grief." I shoved the USB drive into his hand. "Watch this on your phone while I search." The workshop was organized with military precision, every tool in its place, every box labeled in Roland's blocky handwriting. I found boxes marked fuses, wire nuts, voltage testers, but no circuit breakers. Wyatt stood frozen in the corner, his face illuminated by his phone screen, growing paler with each second of Renata's video. "This can't be real," he whispered when it ended. "Keep looking," I said now, checking behind the workbench under tarps, anywhere a box could be hidden. That's when I noticed the old Craftsman tool chest in the corner, the one Roland had supposedly inherited from his father. The bottom drawer was locked, had always been locked. "Never keep anything important in there," he told us as kids. "Just old electrical manuals." I grabbed a crowbar and forced it open. The lock snapped with a sound like a gunshot. Inside, beneath a layer of yellowed repair manuals, was the box. Circuit breakers written on masking tape, just like Ranatada had said. The contents destroyed everything I thought I knew about my life. Photographs. First, Roland in a U.S. Marshal's uniform standing outside a federal courthouse. A younger version of me and Wyatt with different names on school ID cards, Carlo Jr. and Vincent Torino. A woman I didn't recognize holding us both labeled on the back, Maria Torino, 1993. Then the documents. A witness protection agreement dated November 15, 1994. Yeppe Torino, a.k.a. Uncle Goose, agreeing to testify against the Torino crime family in exchange for immunity and new identities for his entire extended family. A medical record from Cincinnati Children's Hospital that made me drop to my knees. Bilateral vasectomy performed on Carlo Torino Jr., age 3. Procedure authorized by U.S. Marshal Roland Davies as per federal prosecutor requirements. Wyatt found his own medical record. Same procedure, same age. We'd both been sterilized as toddlers, our futures stolen before we could even form memories. "We need to confront him," Wyatt said, his voice shaking with rage. Roland was in his recliner when we burst into the house, watching the 11 news like this was any other night. My mother, Lorraine, or whoever she really was, sat on the couch knitting. They both looked up and I saw it immediately in their eyes. They knew why we were there. "You found the box," Roland said quietly. It wasn't a question. "You let them kill her," I shouted, throwing the photographs at his feet. "Renata figured out your lies and you let them murder her." Lorraine started crying, but Roland remained steady, calm in a way that suddenly made sense. This wasn't a retired electrician. This was a federal marshal who'd spent his life managing dangerous situations. "Sit down, son," he said. "Don't call me son. My name is Carlo." "No," he said firmly. "Carlo Torino Jr. died in 1994. You're Colton Davies, my son, in every way that matters. Except biologically," Wyatt spat, "except you stole our ability to have children." Roland aged 10 years in that moment. Your biological father ordered the execution of 3 judges. He had a rival's entire family burned alive in their home, including 2 children younger than you were. The prosecutor said that Torino bloodline was genetically predisposed to violence that it needed to end. It was that, or leave you in the system where the family would eventually find and recruit you. "So, you played God," I said. "I played father," he corrected. "I raised you, loved you, kept you safe for 30 years. And Renata," his composure finally cracked. "She wouldn't stop digging. I warned her, begged her. When she started meeting with that lawyer, word got back to people who still monitor these things. The Torinos have contacts everywhere, even in witness protection. They found out she was asking questions about sealed documents. I got a call saying they knew our location, that if we didn't handle the problem internally, they'd handle it themselves and take all of us. You chose them over her," I said, my voice breaking. "I chose you and Wyatt over her. If she had exposed us, you'd all be dead within a week." The crash was professional. Quick, she didn't suffer. You knew they were going to kill her. I knew they were going to kill someone. I couldn't save everyone. Tears ran down his weathered face. "I've spent 30 years keeping you boys alive. Every day wondering if this would be the day they found us. Every stranger at the door. Every wrong number phone call. You think I don't have nightmares about what I've done? But you're alive. You became a teacher. Wyatt became an engineer. You had lives, careers, love. Love built on lies." I said, "Love is love." Lorraine spoke for the first time. "We weren't your biological parents, but we loved you like our own. That was never a lie." I looked at the man who'd raised me, taught me to ride a bike, walked me down the aisle at my wedding. Roland Davies, U.S. Marshal. The man who'd saved me, and damned me in equal measure. The man who'd let my wife die to keep a 30-year-old secret. "I'm going to the FBI," I said, "tonight." Roland nodded slowly. "I know. There's a bag in the workshop with cash and clean documents. You'll need to disappear after you talk to them. The Torinos will come for you once this gets out." "I don't care." "Yes," he said sadly. "You do. You're my son. You'll survive. It's what I taught you." I drove straight to the FBI field office in downtown Detroit that night. The building was mostly dark except for the security lights and a few windows on the 3rd floor where someone was always working. The security guard at the front desk looked at me with concern. I must have appeared insane, carrying a box full of documents, my eyes red from crying and rage, my clothes disheveled from tearing apart the workshop. "I need to speak with someone about witness protection crimes," I said. "I have evidence of a murder." The investigation that followed turned my life inside out for the second time in a month. Agent Sarah Petrosky, a woman with kind eyes and steel in her voice, took my statement over the course of 12 hours. She made phone calls that brought in senior officials from the U.S. Marshals Service, the Department of Justice, and even someone from the Attorney General's office who participated via secure video link. The USB drive Ranatata had left became evidence. The documents from Roland's workshop were cataloged and photographed. They reopened Renata's accident investigation, and within 2 weeks, they'd found what the local police had missed. Brake fluid on the road that shouldn't have been there, skid marks that didn't match the official report, and a traffic camera that showed a black SUV following Renata's car minutes before the crash. Roland and Lorraine disappeared 3 days after I went to the FBI. Wyatt found their house empty. Coffee still warm on the kitchen table. The television still on. They'd activated some protocol, vanished into whatever network protects former protectors. I never saw them again. Wyatt chose to go with them eventually. said he couldn't handle knowing that strangers might come for him at any moment. He hugged me goodbye in a parking garage, handed me a burner phone with one number programmed in it, and told me to call if I ever truly needed him. The FBI offered me protection, too. A new identity, a new life somewhere, far from Detroit. I declined. I was done running from someone else's past. Done living lies layered on top of lies. Instead, I legally changed my name to what it had always been in my heart, Colton Davies. Let the Torinos come if they wanted. I had nothing left to lose. Bianca found me a month after everything exploded, sitting at Renata's grave. The October ground had settled, and the temporary marker had been replaced with black granite that read, "Beloved wife, seeker of truth." It was simpler than what the funeral director had tried to sell me, but it was honest. "I'm sorry," Bianca said, placing fresh flowers next to mine. "About what I said at the funeral, I was angry. She'd been distant, secretive. I thought she was having an affair. I never imagined the truth was this." "She was trying to protect everyone," I said, "even you." The FBI told me she'd written me a letter explaining everything. They found it in her office. She knew something might happen. Bianca sat down beside me on the cold grass. "She loved you, Colton, more than you'll ever know. That last video she made, she spent half of it talking about how you deserved the truth, how you deserved to make your own choices about your life." We sat in silence for a while. Two people bound by loss and truth. Finally, Bianca stood to leave, then turned back. The yoga instructor, Nolan, his brother really was a federal attorney. She was trying to figure out how to get you both into legitimate witness protection with new identities you choose yourselves. She had plane tickets booked for November, was going to surprise you with a fresh start. Now I teach chemistry at a high school in Portland, Oregon, about as far from Detroit as I could get while staying in the country. My students call me Mr. D, and none of them know that their teacher was born Carlo Torino Jr., son of a mob boss, raised as Colton Davies, son of a U.S. Marshal who wasn't his father. They just know I'm tough but fair, that I grade their lab reports on time, and that I keep a photo of my late wife on my desk. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment with a view of Mount Hood. The walls are painted ocean mist, the color Renata wanted for our guest room. Sometimes I wake up at 3 a.m., certain I hear footsteps in the hallway, certain the Torinos have finally found me. But then morning comes, and I make coffee and I go teach kids about molecular bonds and chemical reactions, about how elements can be transformed into something entirely different under the right conditions. The truth about my family destroyed everything I thought I knew, but it also freed me from 30 years of carefully constructed lies. Renata died for that truth, and while I'd trade anything to have her back, I understand now that living authentically, even with danger shadowing every step, is better than living safely in deception. Some nights I replay that USB video just to hear her voice, to see her face, to remember that someone loved me enough to risk everything for my right to know who I really am. The proof wasn't just in my father's workshop. The proof was in her courage, her determination, and her final act of love. That's my story. If you found it meaningful, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below about times when you've had to choose between comfortable lies and difficult truths. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories that remind us that sometimes the most dangerous secrets are the ones meant to protect us. Thank you for watching, and remember, love might not always be enough to save someone, but truth, even when it destroys everything, can set you free.